Another wild attack on Ukraine by Russian missile forces. 93 missiles and 200 drones were launched. Entire 11 of them were shot down by F-16 fighter jets. EU forces could be the peacekeeping army in Ukraine, but we would provoke deep concerns too. All this and more in our today's episode. Let's go. Last night, Russia launched a massive aerial attack against Ukraine on Friday with dozens of cruise missiles and drones. Ukraine's energy minister Herman Hoshchenko said that Russia was targeting the country's energy grid. The enemy continues its terror, he said. Ukraine's Air Force reported multiple strike drones launched at Ukraine overnight, followed by swarms of cruise missiles in the country's airspace. Russia also used air-launched ballistic Kinzhal missiles against Ukraine's western regions. Let me quote Euronews for you. This Friday's attack is the latest in a series of such raids that have sparked fears that the Kremlin is targeting Ukraine's power grid as a cold winter is about to set in. Sparked fears. What is that supposed to mean? Whose fears are sparked? We in Ukraine have no fears or doubts of any sort about what Russia is doing. We know exactly what it is doing. It commits a war crime before the very eyes of international society that enjoys fears of escalation, express deepest concerns or condolences for that matter, and plan how long Ukraine can go.
This morning, Russia attacked Ukraine's energy grid with 93 missiles and 200 drones, targeting critical infrastructure that civilians in Odessa, Vinnytsia, Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Cherkasy and Kyiv rely on for heat, water and power. We continue to stand with Ukraine against Russia's war, Bridget Brink, US Ambassador to Ukraine on X social network.
While Russia has relentlessly pummeled Ukraine's electricity system since launching its invasion in 2022, its attacks have resulted in the repeated shutdown of critical heating and drinking water supplies during the bitter winter months in an apparent attempt to break Ukrainian spirit and resolve. The previous such massive attack on November 28 involved about 200 missiles and drones and left more than 1 million households without power until emergency teams restored supplies. Thugs in the Kremlin say that the attacks aim to target Ukraine's defense industry, producing missiles, drones, armored vehicles and artillery, among other weapons. Following that Russian logic, when Kakhovka Dam that was controlled by Russians was blasted by Russians themselves, Ukrainian forces had military factories on a territory occupied by Russia. The answer to a question what Putin is doing now is obvious. It is not a question in the first place. Putin gets himself a better stack before any possible negotiations by killing as many Ukrainians as possible. The bloodier the stack, the better the win. What started as a quiet discussion between British and French officials about the possibility have broadened to include Trump, Zelensky and other European governments, according to people briefed on discussions. The discussions over placing European troops on the ground in Ukraine are still at an early stage, with several unresolved questions, including which European countries would be involved, the number of troops, Washington's role in supporting the arrangement, and whether Russia would accept a deal involving troops from NATO countries, and why would they? Losses, you say? Why should Russian Tsar even care about those Russians dying in Ukraine? Expendables, cheap and stupid. Some of these 700,000 Russian corpses even believed in righteous case while alive. So why would Putin stop now, and why would he welcome any agreement with NATO troops involved? Any effort to end the war will face stiff headwinds from dictator Putin, who has shown no inclination whatsoever to end a war he feels he is winning, even though gains by Russian forces are slow and end with heavy losses. For Ukraine, a ceasefire along the current front lines would also be a painful step, seceding control for the foreseeable future of more than 20% of the country.
Foreign peacekeepers into Ukraine could allay Kyiv's fears that its allies would not step up if Russian leader Vladimir Putin resumes the war. Kyiv has the bitter experience of giving up its nuclear arsenal in 1994 in return for security promises that did not prevent a Russian attack. It is very clear that ending the war and winning the peace is only possible when Ukraine is in NATO and in the EU, as Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Olha Stefanishyna informed. From the Politico publication,
Zelensky and Ukraine would like to make a deal and stop the madness, Trump wrote on Truce Social. After the Paris meeting, there should be an immediate ceasefire and negotiations should begin. Trump was heard in Europe, and on Thursday several European foreign ministers met in Berlin for discussions on security guarantees. NATO chief Mark Rutte invited the leaders of the UK, France, Germany, Italy and Poland, as well as European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, to meet with Zelensky in Brussels to discuss the security guarantees, according to two officials familiar with the plans. One thing is clear: whatever and whenever it will be clear, we will keep you posted with no delay. And the commentary for today's topic we will ask to give Andrii Dlyhach, CEO of the Advanta Group consulting company. Greetings, Mr. Dlyhach.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to our studio. What I would like to ask you at first is the crumbling ruble and the Gazprombank under United States sanctions. We have seen many packages of sanctions against Russian oil industry or gas and military industry which were not seem to work that much, but this one particular, it seems really painful for the most large Russian foreign currency bank. What will continue? Even some European companies and European governments insist on releasing sanctions on this bank.
Unfortunately, as we can see, these sanctions still are not killing ones. Starting with this full-scale invasion, we jointly with 600 of economists around the world prepared the list of necessary sanctions in order to stop Russia. Unfortunately, only 70% of these sanctions list were realized. But as we see, trade embargo, real financial sanctions, sanctions on banking system, personal sanctions with exit strategy are not realized yet. In fact, sanctions against Gazprombank was a crucial issue even 2 years ago. It could give us possibility to stop funding this war. At least 1/3 part of the Russian budget, which is oriented on gas and oil, could be stopped. Some sanctions are now very effective, but some of them are not so effective, and Russia found a way how to have another flow through such countries as Vietnam or United Arab Emirates or even Georgia. But we consider that anyways, the current package of sanctions could be effective.
Yes, and what do you think about some European companies and even governments asking the United States to release the sanctions on this bank because they want to continue buying Russian fuels?
Unfortunately, it's realpolitik, and we should take into account. But of course, the numbers are very prominent. $20 billion was paid as taxes in the Russian Federation, as the taxes from international companies in this market. Our analysis have shown that the Russian budget, $180 billion for the next year, and the additional 100 of secret budget in Russia is 5 times more than Ukrainian budget for the defense. In addition to this, Russia is buying armors and weapons from Northern Korea 5 to 10 times cheaper than Ukraine buys from European countries or from US. This means that in order to have the equal situation, Ukraine should have 3 to 5 times bigger budget for the defense. But in fact, we have the opposite situation. So it's a crucial issue for the Western world to stop Russia using economic instruments like sanctions on the level of trade embargo, level of financial sanctions. And I'd like to add that it's very important to add personal sanctions with exit strategy to let thousands of Russian oligarchs, businessmen, power authorities, regional politicians to stop this war by stopping of Putin's support inside of Russia.
And what about the possibility of joint European security mission in Ukraine to safeguard the possible truce line? We have heard these discussions after the Gazprombank sanctions and after Zelensky and Trump met in Paris, and I really don't think that Mr. Putin will agree to such a mission in Ukraine. He wants to conquer all Ukraine after all.
You see, I believe that it could be a temporary option for the peace, but not for a stable peace, but not for a strategic peace in Europe. The problem is that Ukrainian interests are the following. Ukraine should exist, Ukraine should develop, Ukraine should be a part of NATO and European Union. But the Putin's and Russian interests concerning Ukraine is that Ukraine should be a failed state. Ukraine shouldn't exist at all. So we do not have a compromise. So any scenarios like a temporary peace or even European forces on the territory of Ukraine, it's just it's not a strategic solution. The only strategic way to have a peace in Europe is deconstruction of Russia, to demilitarize Russia completely, to denazify Russia, to change the rules in this country, to democratize Russia.
Well, what we're seeing now in Syria, the fall of the regime, a simple the departure of the leader or just cessation of its existence will lead to a power vacuum, and then some other forces, democratic or non-democratic, will have a chance to take the lead and change something. Do you even hope for that a change in power can happen in Russia and they will stop this disastrous and suicidal war against Ukraine?
Great idea, and we are working on it since 2022, helping regional elites, real elites, political elites of the Russian regions to be prepared for the deconstruction of Russian Federation strategy. And I'd like to say that despite we do not have full support from European Union or United States, but this strategy could be fruitful in the future. We hope that new administration in the US will accept this idea and will help national elites in Russia to have strong, democratic, developed countries on the territory of Russia in the future.
Okay, so let's return to the question of economy, because right now there is stagflation in this huge war machine that Putin has launched. I mean, all the armor and equipment produced with millions of jobs is going straight to Ukraine, probably to be destroyed or to stand and occupy Ukrainian territory. And the ruble is skyrocketing with the course to the dollar, and the basic rates of interest rates of the central bank, they are all rising. It's similar to the 80s, 90s in the Soviet Union. Do you see that the inner collapse of economy, not the outer sanctions, can do more harm to Russia than anything else?
It's a very interesting situation, because from one hand, we see that Russia cannot manage this stagflation process even more. We will have in Russia negative economic growth next year, and even now more than 3/4 part of Russian industries are now in stagnation process. They are decreasing. So Russian economy is really in troubles now. The same for inflation. Real inflation is not 9% as Central Bank of Russia consider, but in reality it's more than 25%, 0.5 per week. In addition to this, Russia cannot borrow money on the global market, even China, so their lack of funding. They cannot fund their budget deficit by their own resources. The last fund of National Wealth Fund can cover only this year deficit, but for next year they will not manage to cover this deficit. Despite of this, they increase war budget dramatically. There will be lack of new incomes from oil and gas next year, so they will not be able to fund this war in dollars, but in rubles. Unfortunately, it's the opposite side of this story. Second part, that in rubles, in printed by the central bank, maybe with the next authorities, because I'm not sure that current authorities in the Central Bank of Russia will keep their position in next year. So Russia can print as much rubles as they need to pay soldiers or their families after their soldiers' death, to have more and more meat for this war. And unfortunately, Russia do not consider humans as the real capital. It's just resources which can be used for this war. And we see that unfortunately, this strategy is more or less effective for Russia, and Russia now cover more and more Ukrainian territory by their soldiers' attacks without the additional technique, without without planes, without drones. Even they have lack of drones on the front line. But despite of these, they are effective, and this is a real problem. We need to stop Russia on the front line. Ukraine needs more weapon, more technologies in order to be stronger in this strategic defense.
Well, I hope that's true, that stopping Russia on the front line will lead to a clash in the inside economy, and the war will finally end. Thank you very much, Mr. Dlyhach, for being with us today. We have right now to say goodbye and hope to see you again in our studio. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, that was all for today. Like, share and subscribe to our channel to support the news of the free world, which are delivered to you directly from Ukraine. On Sunday, you will see my colleague Henry Keane presenting the weekly episode to you. Stay safe and don't let propaganda win.